Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and petrol heads all around the world, welcome to episode 5 of F1 Radio. F1 Radio is your dedicated source of anything and everything you need to know in the world of Formula 1. We bring you all the latest paddock gossip and racing rumours, as well as reviewing Grand Prix events and answering your questions in the listeners' Q&A segment. Come rain or shine, F1 Radio is your dedicated Formula 1 podcast airing on every Grand Prix week on podcast services across the internet for your amusement. If you like what you hear, follow us on Twitter @_F1 Radio to let us know what you think and to send us your F1 related questions that, if you're lucky enough, we will answer in a future episode. I'm your host, Tom Fenton, and as always, joining me today is the editor-in-chief of ReadMotorsport.com and Autosport Junior, Josh Shattil.
Yep, hello everyone, and wow, what a race that was, and plenty to discuss. I'm sure there's going to be long discussions all the way, of course, till this weekend, of course, which is Mexican Grand Prix, back-to-back F1. We're certainly not complaining.
If you didn't already know, every F1 Radio episode is split into 3 juicy segments to ensure every wheel nut is tightened correctly before the episode leaves the pit box and into your various devices. Let's start off with what is and forever will be the Weekly Watch. In today's episode, we have 4 news items to discuss in the world of Formula 1. So Josh, let's begin with the first and arguably the most controversial news item. What is that?
Yes, well, of course, that is the kind of corner-cutting track limits debate that's been going on, of course, all spiraled from Sunday's, of course, American Grand Prix. This was, of course, the charging Max Verstappen from the back, of course, from the back of the grid. He was on a 2-stopper. Kimi Räikkönen in 3rd place was on a 1-stopper. And, of course, as so often, these kind of mixed strategies, they kind of converged on the very last lap. And Verstappen was kind of harrowing, Räikkönen, and then they got into sector 3, and then Räikkönen, went a little bit wide in kind of the tight, twisty kind of sector 3 bit. It's basically kind of a flat out right-hander, and Verstappen just managed to kind of sneak up the inside, but he did it by putting 4 wheels off the track, and then he still managed to, of course, make the overtake. Verstappen crossed the line in 3rd. Big jubilation, and then of course the unthinkable happened, and for the 2nd year in a row, of course, last time it was at Mexico, this year in America, Verstappen in the kind of cool down room was told to basically get out, because he'd been demoted to 4th. Räikkönen had been promoted onto the podium because Verstappen had been given a 5-second penalty for cutting the track and gaining an advantage. So, Tom, big story then. What do you make of this one?
I think obviously we're going to go more into Verstappen's performance at the weekend and the Grand Prix in our race report, but a lot of you listeners out there have been sending us questions about this specific topic, so we're just going to talk more about the rules here and yes, answer the question, was Verstappen or was his penalty right or wrong? So I think from my opinion and perspective, he deserved the penalty. Ultimately, he overtook a car by crossing the limits of the track, and all 4 wheels were off the track clearly, and you can say whatever else you want, that was an illegal overtake. I think the problem a lot of people have, like we were discussing off air, is the consistency with the stewards. So what I'm trying to say is that, okay, Verstappen, what he did was illegal, but what about everybody else who was cutting corners every single lap to gain advantages throughout the race? They probably made up a lot more time than he did at that one stage. But I think the clear difference between just cutting a corner and what Verstappen did was that he actually overtook somebody because he cut the corner. So I think that's why I got the penalty, personally. And I think track limits was something that we haven't really talked about in recent memory in F1, so I thought it was all cleared up. But obviously I was looking in practice for the US Grand Prix this weekend or last weekend, and there was a lot of cars literally extending the track in ridiculous ways, and I was thinking, we're going back to them days, are we? So when the FIA just give the drivers the ability to do what they want, they really do, take every inch. If you give them an inch, they'll run a mile, right? And that's what they do. That's what they're paid to do. So I think, I don't know, Josh, what would you do? That's a good question. What would you do?
Well, we need more consistency, don't we, from the stewards? I mean, as you were kind of saying, the drivers are going to, take that advantage if it's there for them. And, of course, many people pointed to, that's the design of the modern circuits, of course. Put gravel tracks at every corner, of course, is
you
quite a
can't
common
blame the
suggestion.
design of a circuit. You can't do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. You just need better policing, I think. I mean, that is a consideration for future track design, and sure, you can build that in. But, of course, putting gravel traps every corner would be ridiculous. And I don't think that's the way to go, really. Like you say, I think they've just got to kind of make do with what they got in terms of the tracks. Of course, they can't drastically, rebuild them all. So, really, for them, they need to just police it better. You can't rely, of course, on the drivers, to kind of stick to the track limits more. You've got to penalise drivers, make an example. And I guess, in a way, this was kind of good that, Verstappen was made an example of by kind of doing this. But at the same time, it was just horribly inconsistent. And also the way they kind of just penalised him straight away without even hearing his point of view. The way they didn't release Kimi Räikkönen's POV of the incident was a very, very strange one. And the way that, this kind of inconsistencies have just been carrying on, it's not been great publicity for F1, really. And it was certainly a strange one, really, from the FIA. And we have kind of seen this over the past 2 years, kind of inconsistent stewarding, especially between, with Max Verstappen as well, it seems to be. Some of his kind of defensive manoeuvres over the past 2 years, or kind of since he came into F1, have been very, very questionable. And he just really hasn't been penalised for them. And then we also got the kind of, blocking during qualifying. Seems to be very inconsistent as well. So I think part of the problem is definitely this kind of celebrity or driver steward that they seem to have at every single round. It seems to be very kind of inconsistent, of course, because it's someone completely different at every single race. So I think, Tom, possibly time for a kind of fixed and permanent stewarding lineup just to keep it, a bit more consistent.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think obviously it's quite a difficult thing to police in terms of having somebody more consistent because F1 travels around the world. I do agree though that they should have maybe a permanent or maybe only, I don't know, you do half a season, so 2 stewards, they do half a season, if you know what I mean. But either way, I don't know the solution ultimately. We have ideas, but let us know if you're listening. Tweet us at _F1 Radio and tell us what you would do in this situation. So now it's time for the second news item, Josh, and that relates to the Toro Rosso musical chairs situation, I guess is the best way to describe it. They have, for the Mexican Grand Prix, decided to drop Kvyat yet again in the 2017 season, and they are going to remain with the Hartley Australian New Zealand guy, who is known for endurance racing. And, what do you make of this? Toro Rosso are a team that usually introduce young drivers. Now, I know the guy has never been in F1 before prior to the US Grand Prix last weekend, but he's not exactly young.
No, it is a strange one, isn't it, from Toro Rosso? Possibly kind of changing of philosophy, but they're kind of backed into a corner by kind of recent announcements, obviously signs going off to Renault, and then kind of, various things been going on with kind of Danny Kvyat as well. Of course, that's been a kind of a long roller coaster. And there's ERV Matt212 says on Twitter, he says thoughts on the Toro Rosso roulette of driver picks each week, and it really is that, kind of a roulette for Toro Rosso at the moment. They seem to be kind of swapping out drivers left, right, and centre. They have kind of, reached their maximum now. You're only allowed to use 4 drivers per season, so they have the kind of pool of drivers they have to use. For the rest of the season, it's not going to be signed, so it's got to be between Hartley, Gasly, and Fiat. And as you mentioned, Tom, of course, they've gone for Hartley and Gasly for Mexico, which is certainly an interesting one. Hartley, of course, the Kiwi. A very, very good driver in LMP1, of course, a Le Mans winner. And I think he's going to be a 2-time, LMP1 kind of championship winner. He's kind of dominating this season. So it's definitely a very successful endurance racer. And then, of course, his F1 career looked to be over back in kind of 2009, 2010. But then, got this surprise opportunity. Was never really going to be able to do that well this weekend in terms of he was never going to be able to beat Danny Kvyat, of course, because he hasn't driven a single seater, I think, since 2012, when he drove, I think it was a Mercedes. So, I think Hartley had a difficult task this weekend. But Tom, he seemed to handle himself pretty well, keeping out of trouble. 18th in qualifying and then 13th in the race. So, not too bad.
It's like you said, it's so difficult to come into Formula One, especially when you haven't been racing recently in single-seaters. So I do think, though, it's a good example that you should never give up on your dreams. I know it sounds really cliche or whatever, but this guy, he wanted to be an F1, and I know he obviously probably did at some stage give up on the dream, but look, later on in his career, he's made his F1 debut, and it seems as if, maybe he is a serious contender for next season for Toro Rosso.
Well, that is this it now for Fiat, basically?
Yeah, this is what we need to sort of discuss. We all assume that Gasly is the first driver, or at least confirmed, for Toro Rosso. It's all about who pairs him, and I know a lot of people have said Kvyat had a really good race in Austin, but he didn't have Sainz as a benchmark, so we can say that he did great when the guy who's potentially a world champion has just left the team. So, Hartley, like you said, he did well, but he was never going to do great. And I think I get the vibe that Toro Rosso, like a lot of us have been praying for, don't want anything to do with Kvyat anymore, which is cruel, but I think that's the right thing to do.
And we have to cut him now, surely. I mean, I think it's cool to kind of keep him hanging on, to kind of keep putting him in and out. As long as Hartley does a decent job over these last 4 races, I think it's probably going to be their kind of 2018 lineup, as you said, Gasly and Hartley, which is, if you just said that at the start of 2017 or even a month ago, is not the one, we'd have predicted. I think on our last podcast, we were talking about who's going to possibly replace Gasly, and we did not mention Hartley at all because he was not a contender then, but really kind of came out of nowhere. And I think Hartley came across very, very well within the team as well. He did an interview with Channel 4 with Karun Chandler, of course, who used to be his kind of former teammate. And, he kind of admitted that he was kind of too young for that role, back in 2009, 2010. He was too young for the opportunity then. His head kind of dropped when he was dropped by Red Bull in a similar way to kind of Danny Kvyat. But he had that time away from the programme. He built himself up as an endurance driver and then came back to Formula 1. And then, of course, now got his racing opportunity. So that's an example of someone who, came into F1 a bit too young, but then had a second chance to kind of come back. Whereas Danny Kvyat is probably another example of someone who came in too early, Tom. But someone who, he's had so many chances to kind of come back. I think surely now, with F1 being so sink or swim, this could be the last race for Danny Kvyat, that we've just had.
I think Kvyat, for whatever reason, he must have some sort of raw pace, or there's something special about him, because they wouldn't have given him so many opportunities. There must be something in the telemetry that says that he's really good, because, you look at the amount of times he's made mistakes, and you compare it to somebody like Palmer, and he's no longer in F1 now. You could say Palmer has done worse. I don't know.
Yes.
I think you look at Kvyat, throughout the seasons, and he's made a lot of mistakes, regardless of whether he was at Toro Rosso, whoever the teammate was, whether he was at Red Bull. He's got the pace maybe, but he hasn't got the consistency, and I don't think he's got the right head to, really even fight for a win, let alone championships and etc. So.
Time away from F1 will be good for him. I think for his mental state as well.
I mean, he came back to Austin and he looked okay. He did well, but it's like I said before, when you don't have a great driver next to you, then of course you're going to look great. Everybody's going to... That's why everybody was saying that he had a good drive, because he was against somebody who's never been in a Formula 1 car in a race anyway. So, yeah, I hope his days are numbered. I think he's a nice guy, but in F1, I think it's not... I don't really think he should be there anymore than somebody like Palmer. Palmer would have been. But the second or third news item, shall I say, Josh, it's all about the driver market yet again. So why don't you introduce this to the listeners?
We do love talking about the driver market, don't we, Tom? And this is a nice bit of confirmation rather than speculation, which is always nice. But we're going to lead into some speculation, guys, so don't worry. Let's start off with the confirmed news then. That's Verstappen, Red Bull, end of 2020. Alonso is re-signed for 2018. Alonso, first of all, Tom, pretty much we kind of knew that since the Renault deal was announced.
Yeah.
Pretty much driven by Alonso, right?
That was a done deal. As soon as, like you said, the Renault deal was announced, if it was anything other, it would have been the shock of the century. Yeah.
And Verstappen, we talked about last week, is he going to jump ship? We know he's committed now. I'm sure there's some kind of clause in there, but if he doesn't win a championship, he's allowed out. But I think this is a good kind of confirmation of Verstappen and Red Bull, and they really have come together in the second half of the year. Verstappen has been the only man really to get close to Hamilton.
I think this is a clever move. The more I think about this over the weekend, obviously I think it was announced just before the weekend commenced, maybe Thursday night, Friday morning, whatever, and I initially thought, what are they doing? Why are they tying themselves to potentially another few more years of just finishing second or third in a race, not really having a championship winning car. But you never know what Renault will be capable of next year, and then Honda, because I'm assuming everybody else is thinking that Honda will be Red Bull's maybe interim engine supplier until the 2021 rules kicking, because I think Renault don't want anything to do with them anymore after next season. But this is more speculation. But anyway, I think what's good is that Verstappen has seen that the way to win a championship is having a team built around you, and that's what Mercedes have done with Hamilton, Vettel at Ferrari. So maybe he's trying to get that done. And we all heard what Horner said, that Verstappen could have a team around him to be moulded around him, if you will. So in some ways he jumped the gun, and I'm surprised, because I really did think that he was keen to get a works driver at Mercedes or Ferrari. But this is now the conversation we've got to have. Where does this leave Ricciardo? The guy is arguably one of the best drivers on the grid, just like Max Verstappen is, but he now no longer... He's in a less desirable situation now, because whoever he goes to in the top 3 teams, he is not going to have that team moulded around him. Not that he has already had that at Red Bull, but you sort of get what I'm saying. Do you agree, Josh? I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe I'm talking trash. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I kind of before was like, yeah, Ricciardo, Red Bull, that makes sense, stick around. But like you said, the more and more you kind of think about it, the more and more you kind of think, well, Ricciardo should probably try and find a way out of there. I mean, Hamilton's not going to be around forever, of course, but then he's still probably got a good kind of 5 years. Ricciardo is, 28, something like that. So
yeah, he's not the youngest.
Yeah, he's not the youngest, but obviously Verstappen's got time on his side. He could be Red Bull for a very long time. This could be on the eve of the Verstappen era, where he's just absolutely dominant at Red Bull. So where does that leave Ricciardo? Well, it leaves him in a pretty difficult situation. He's been thoroughly beaten by Verstappen this year. The points kind of difference has kind of flattered him, I think, because if you look at the kind of qualifying or kind of pure pace, Ricciardo's lacking. But he is still, one of the best drivers on the grid for sure. So he'd be a great asset, for Ferrari and Mercedes. I don't see him with Vettel. I just don't think Vettel's going to allow that to happen. I think Leclerc's pretty much nailed on there. And then you look at Mercedes again, and kind of from their point, having Hamilton and Ricciardo would be a fantastic lineup. But they really want that kind of big tension. They probably favour promoting someone like Ocon, if they do choose to get rid of Bottas, that is, which of course I think they will. At the end of 2018. So, like you say, it's very hard to see where Ricciardo can go. Alonso possibly could replace Alonso possibly at McLaren, but again, Van Dorn, if he kind of steps up his game next year, McLaren going to build the team around him. So Ricciardo's in a very, very difficult situation, and this is why he's delaying his decision. I think that's what's important, really. He can stick around with Red Bull for now. He can kind of start next season and then begin to think about his future beyond 2018.
My honest opinion is that Ricciardo is a driver that I think a lot of people would want in the car. But like you said, from his personal opinion, he's not going to have a car now where he is... Well, definitely at Ferrari and Mercedes, I don't see them giving him equal share with the current driver, being, Seb or Hamilton. Obviously, I think Red Bull is the only place he could stay that is currently in a potentially winning scenario where he would be given fair dibs. I think he would.
Would it be fair? Or is he Mark Webber?
I think it would be fair. I do think
Yes.
Ricciardo is... Like, a lot of people obviously have, a lot of opinions about Verstappen and how great he's going to be. But I don't think a lot of people maybe appreciate Ricciardo enough. I think, honestly, he is a very complete driver. He may not be the fastest in every race, but... you look at the results, and okay, obviously Verstappen has had some poor issues with engines, etc., and retirements, but the results speak for themselves. And Ricciardo always seems to find a way. And obviously, I think his overtake on Bottas, or he tried to overtake Bottas in the Grand Prix, that was amazing. But anyway, I think this is a lot of speculation. It's difficult to say. Ricciardo's a great driver, but like we both said, he's now. It's almost as if it's time for him to show his hands, and everybody's forced him to think a little bit more than maybe he would like to. But the final news item, I think, Josh, unless you had anything else to say about that.
No, I think just Ricciardo, like I say, keep his options open. Look at McLaren and Renault for next year. If they're really, really, performing well, look possibly for a switch there. That's all I'm going to say.
So the final news item is related to the broadcasting of Formula One itself. So as you know, in every country, like in any sport, there are different deals, there are different broadcasters that present and provide coverage for a sport. Obviously, F1 has been going through a transition in a lot of countries from free-to-air to pay television. And this is something that is common with a lot of sports. We all know this has happened before with football in the 90s. But F1, obviously, it wasn't a great thing. I think it really did affect the viewers, obviously. But F1 is now going down another avenue. And I've been, I don't want to try and sound really cool here, but I have been predicting this for a very long time. You can check my tweets. I've been saying this for years. There's no question. F1 or the FIA or whoever are in charge, so Liberty, I guess we should say.
FOM and Liberty, yeah.
Yeah, FOM and Liberty are going to be providing a streaming service for F1 in 2018. Now, there are a few rules that must be applied to this news item. It only applies to certain countries, and of course there's going to be a lot of conflict between television broadcasters and the internet provider, whether that be, say, Netflix or Amazon Prime, or whether F1 just do it all themselves, which I think is probably what would happen because of the percentage shares that maybe Amazon or Netflix would like. So I think, Josh, I'd like to know what you think about this, and is this something you've been predicting?
It's something I've been hoping for, but the way F1 was going, I never thought it'd happen, at least for not another kind of 5 years. But I guess with Liberty Media coming in, it's kind of sped up that process. I mean, certainly under Bernie, we would not be getting this.
Definitely.
But to be launching as soon as 2018 is fantastic, really. You kind of mentioned the Netflix, Amazon, and as you said, I think it's all going to be kind of in-house in terms of it's going to be a proper kind of F1 production, because Netflix, Amazon, it's a huge cost to the rights to Formula 1, and the kind of returns do not match up, so it makes sense for it to be a kind of in-house production for Formula 1. They've been talking to Netflix, basically, I think, just to kind of get help in terms of how do you do this. So they'll get kind of advisors, they'll probably pay Netflix a small fee or something, and get some kind of support from them, use some of their software and stuff like that. So it won't actually be on Netflix. I very much doubt, but F1's going to be on Netflix or Amazon, but it is going to be on a kind of a similar type service, completely kind of run by Formula 1, which I think is really, really cool and really, really exciting. Like you said, though, the main stumbling block, unfortunately, is Sky Sports F1 or whoever it may be in that particular country. I know, of course, probably most people listening are from the UK, and they obviously know about the Sky Sports situation. That's what we know best. But of course, there are lots of different situations throughout the world. But probably most people listening live in a country where pay-per-view TV, is the thing for F1. It's actually a lot worse in a lot of other countries. We think we're bad off in the UK, but it's even worse in some others. And of course, the major thing is the 2019 contract has already been signed. So the 2019, I think, till 2024, Sky have exclusive rights. So that's when it's going to get really bad. And that's the problem, because if it was this kind of where it's going to expire at the end of 2018, this would be perfect timing, but unfortunately the deal's done, and Tom, it's going to be hard, isn't it, to get kind of past this contract. At the moment, I think what's going to happen is we're going to have a streaming service for anyone not living in the UK or kind of other areas where pay-per-view TV is locked in a contract. So like America, for example, it's going to be happening there. That's going to be a proper, all kind of access subscription service. And then for people in the UK, it's probably going to be kind of behind the scenes, archive, post-race highlights kind of thing. So I still think there's going to be a streaming service in the UK, but I don't think it's going to be having live sessions.
I don't want to get too off topic, but it's like anything. Everything is going digital. It doesn't matter how much you don't want to. It will. So, I think Sky, etc. should try and jump on that ship. I think they should be part of that and try and learn that sometimes you've got to accept the way the tide's going. It's pointless trying to fight it. It is going that way. You're not going to win. So, maybe they have the rights for the next 5-10 years, whatever, Sky. But, when you get into the weeds of the contract, maybe it's only television rights. Internet is something completely different. So, Liberty, if they can, find a loophole in the contract, could offer this very soon in every country, depending on what the contracts say and all the agreements, because it's not television, it is internet television. It's a different type of broadcasting. It's not really broadcasting, but I'm not, I don't want to get too technical in this podcast, but ultimately, Liberty are the people who are trying to do this, and they are the ones who, sell their rights to broadcast it to people like Sky. So, if Sky don't want to be part of that, or whoever is the pay-per-view service, then, Liberty can just cut them off F1 completely. They can just do it all in-house, and, this is one thing that a lot of people maybe don't quite realise, but most people are willing to spend, say for example, if this was £5 or £10 a month or something like that, most people would be more willing to spend that just for their F1 than say spend £30 on say Sky Sports, where you get a lot more sports. So for your bang for your buck, it's probably better on the Sky Sports, but obviously you're spending £20 extra a month. But people are more willing to spend more for what they specifically want, even though, technically it's less, but you know what I mean, don't you? So ultimately...
Oh yeah, there should be tiers. I think there's going to be tiers as well, so you can get
is that so?
like... I think there'll be like kind of, live sessions, that's it.
So you get like, then, you just get a race pass. Or,
yeah, you might just get, maybe just a race qualifying pass, or all sessions pass, or kind of all sessions plus behind the scenes archive
and like
stuff,
the special
really
like
cool.
interviews they do
Classic
or whatever,
race.
maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in terms of pricing point as well, I do wonder where they're going to go, because this is F1. Let's remember, the most expensive sport in the world. So let's hope. I mean, £10, like you said, probably reasonable. I don't think they might not even go any lower than that. To be honest, I think £10 is probably what they're going to do. You've got kind of standard definition, high definition, 4K as well. So that's another kind of tier element to it as well.
It is. I just hope they don't go down that route, because it's very complicated when you start. Then you have to have some sort of, what's the sort of diagram where you've got two circles and it's where they overlap? Venn diagram. It's like you've got to have some sort of like mathematical display to show what different tiers mean. Like, I don't know, with games where they come with so many different pre-order bonuses, you don't know which one's which.
That's true.
I don't want it to be too complicated, but they will obviously have a tier, like you said.
Netflix is £6 for standard definition, £8 for HD, and then £10 for 4K. And then there's certain, kind of 1 screen, 2 screen, 4 screen. So they break it down well. So hopefully they'll follow Netflix and kind of break it down nice and easily for everyone to see. Which, hopefully they will do. And hopefully this is going to come in 2018. It's not officially confirmed, but it's all but confirmed.
Yeah, so I think for countries that don't have good broadcasting of F1s, I'm not just saying that the TV company do, a poor job in whatever country you may live in, but I just mean, for example, I think in America,
like a world feed or something,
there was obviously, I think there's some issues that i.e. certain companies don't want to, broadcast it anymore. So this is a great service for them, and you must look outside of F1. There are other sports that do this already in America, like NFL, American football, and they do this very successfully. It makes a lot of money. So, you don't have to go through the deal and the hassle with getting a third party like Sky involved. So, anyway, this is, a really complicated thing that's, to be honest, going to be settled in a courtroom probably, unless, these TV providers want to jump on board, and, maybe Sky could do all the presenting, offer the talent, but, Sky's, like a lot of companies that have a lot of power, don't want to relinquish any of that power. They want to keep it all. So
I think it's going to be a long, hard battle, I think, for F1 to do it. But you've got like MotoGP, for example. That's exclusive to kind of BT, but they still have a streaming service where you can pay a subscrition.
I don't think Sky would like that though.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be a tough one. I'm glad I'm not the one negotiating it, because we know what Sky like from other sports. It's going to be a long journey. It makes
sense. You pay a certain amount of money. You want that exclusivity, but it's, again, as like I said, you're fighting an inevitable loss. So you might as well be a part of it, or just go away and focus on elsewhere. But anyway, Josh, that is the end of the news.
Today's racing report is, of course, the 2017 United States Grand Prix. It's the 17th round of the 2017 Formula 1 season, and it was won by Lewis Hamilton, an overtake on Sebastian Vettel. Yes, that's right, we had a fight for the lead, which was great to see, but it wasn't much of a fight after lap 7, I believe it was, when Hamilton passed Vettel at the end of the long straight, and then he was just gone off into the distance pretty much. A great win for Hamilton. He's in top form at the moment. So, of course, he took the win then, the full 25 points, within touching distance now of that 4th world title. Then Vettel was, of course, in second. Raikkonen making it an all-Ferrari podium after that 5-second penalty for Verstappen after the race. That drops Verstappen to fourth. Then you've got Bottas, a very distant fifth, 35 seconds nearly behind Hamilton. Then you had Esteban Ocon then in sixth. What a great race from the Frenchman. He's really hitting his stride recently. And Carlos Sainz Jr., what a Renault debut for him. Seventh place on his debut for the French manufacturer. Then you had Sergio Perez in eighth, Felipe Massa in ninth, Danny Kvyat in what might be his last Formula 1 race in 10th, Stroll 11th, Van der Waal 12th, Brendan Hartley on his debut for Toro Rosso, and of course his Formula 1 debut altogether, was 13th, Romain Grosjean 14th, Marcus Ericsson was 15th, of course after that collision with Magnussen. Ericsson received a penalty but still finished ahead of Magnussen, who was down in 16th, and the last of the classified finishers. Then we had 4 retirements: Fernando Alonso, 9th retirement of the year, Daniel Ricciardo, 4th retirement of the year, I believe. He's had a bit of good luck throughout the season compared to Verstappen, so I guess this is kind of a bit of balancing. Pascal Wehrlein had collision damage from the opening lap, so he retired in lap 5. Nico Hülkenberg's weekend never really got going, had grid penalties for the race, and then engine issue curtailed his charge after just 3 laps. So then, Tom, let's kick it off with, of course, the winner, Hamilton. And a bit embarrassing, really, wasn't it, for Ferrari and Vettel? Great jump. Great, move into the lead for Vettel, but then Hamilton just sailed past.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously, because I'm somebody like you who wants this to go all the way down to the wire, and I was really hoping that Vettel was going to get ahead into turn 1. He did, and he made it stick for a few laps, but, I think the pace we saw in practice and qualifying really cemented this Mercedes win, regardless of whatever Vettel and Ferrari could do. Obviously, Hamilton got close enough. He initially lost the DRS zone, but he got close enough. He found, the finger on the button, and he overtook him. And it wasn't even close. Vettel did not make much of a defense. I understand when, sometimes it's not worth fighting, but this is for the championship. It would have been better if them two would have collided than the results that has happened. And ultimately, this leaves Vettel in a situation where he can't win. I mean, obviously, mathematically, he can, but he can't. Let's not pretend that this is something...
It's a formality, isn't it, for him to not only win the title, but wrap it up in Mexico, pretty much.
I mean, I think Hamilton would have to, for the rest of the races now, unless each time he retires, the next race he'd only have to finish 5th anyway. So he'd have to pretty much retire for every Grand Prix now. And unless Ferrari are going to sabotage, and create a bit of a drama, I don't see this happening. But I think Hamilton had a really good race. I obviously, like a lot of people, don't see a lot of Hamilton or Mercedes because usually when they're leading, they don't broadcast it because it's boring, or whether it's Ferrari leading. But Hamilton, for whatever reason, this race, I noticed that he did really well, and I thought, wow, this is why he deserves the championships. But Ferrari, I think they did the best they could have done. Kimi Räikkönen had a good race, Josh. I think ultimately he tried very well, and I think he was a little bit cautious overtaking certain drivers, but he got the job done. 3rd on the podium, and even though Ferrari's bid to win the Constructors' Championship was already over, it has now been confirmed Mercedes are champions for 2017. Yet again, we've had 4 titles won in a row by the same team. So what do you make of, that situation? The consistency Mercedes have had over the 4 years, and Ferrari, basically they had a bad race, but they made the most of it.
Yeah, I mean, what an excellent job from Mercedes, first of all. This hybrid era has been dominated by them. They've just been on it from that very first race in 2014 to this, latest round in Austin. They've done a fantastic job. That whole team, the team the race operating team, and then the team back at base as well. They've just been working together so well. I mean, we never really got any kind of stories of friction within the team. We did get a bit between Hamilton and Rosberg and those kind of various factions, but really the team's just been working together so well. Hamilton and Rosberg, Bottas, have always had a really, really good car to go out there and win races. It's been such a rare event for Mercedes to turn up at a weekend and not have a car capable of, winning that race or even getting a 1-2, of course, which they've had plenty of those. And ultimately, Hamilton just seems to be driving better than ever. He's in frighteningly good form where, he could easily win all 3 remaining races of the season and cap off what's been, I think, one of his best years in Formula 1. Certainly, without, say, Monaco and Russia, possibly in those kind of off weekends, this would easily be his best year, and you can definitely make the case for this being his best title win. He hasn't been run, as closely as possibly before, say for example 2008, but I think he's been driving, supremely good, and I think, for me this is probably his best title win. If he wins it, of course, but that should happen in Mexico. And like you said, Ferrari, I guess, did the best job they could. Second and third is good. It kind of fends off any possible attempt from Red Bull to get second in the constructors. Pretty much confirms Ferrari into second place as well, so that's good for them. But ultimately, it was pretty embarrassing, really, to be just overtaken like that by Hamilton. Vettel didn't put up much of a fight. Possibly caught napping, but I mean, I guess either way, for Mercedes, usually are pretty bad and dirty air to kind of just catch and pass Vettel. Pretty embarrassing, Ferrari.
Yeah, I think for the more I think about that overtake that Hamilton made, I just don't understand why Vettel, being the type of character he is, wouldn't have just said, right, if I can't defend you, we will crash. I don't know why he didn't do that, and I know people can say that is the wrong mentality to have in racing, but I don't care who you are. If you know the only way you can win is by if you know the best result is crashing rather than letting that person past you, then you're going to do it at this stage in the career. I don't care who you are personally. We saw this happen, or not this happen, but look at what Hamilton did last year. He was driving crazy slow at the end of Abu Dhabi because he knew the only way he could do it was to get Rosberg overtaken by one of the Ferraris or Red Bulls behind. So, okay, maybe we're not at the finale, but that was the finale for Sebastian Vettel, really, to get something out of this, and it's over now. So I just thought I would see a bit more fire from him, and yeah, I just don't understand why he didn't take that sort of risk, as we've seen him do through the season. I remember there was an overtake in Canada where I was like, wow, this is one of the best overtakes I've ever seen. That's so risky to do so early on in the season, and that's what Sebastian's almost known for, apart from just running away in the lead of races. So yeah, I don't think it was. I think it showed that he was already defeated, to be honest. Maybe not mentally or whatever, but he knew the game was over. But ultimately, I think we know the Mercedes and Ferrari situation. This is a confirmed another double championship for Mercedes and Ferrari. They are very close, and hopefully, they'll be able to have a bit more of a stronger battle next year. But maybe we should have a look behind, or do you want to talk about Bottas?
No, not really. I think
that's fine.
It was, I think it's pretty much what we said previously. Really, he was really slow. I'm sorry, to kind of start off the race and start off stints. He was really poor pace. He showed really good fight at the start of the race. Defending very well against Ricciardo, who of course was ambitious as ever and putting on a great show. And then second half of the race, he just seemed to kind of let everyone past. The way Verstappen passed him, and that was fairly embarrassing and just not a good round for Bottas.
Yeah, so I think we should talk about the lesser paying point positions, because there were some great stellar drives, almost perfection in the middle field there, especially by two youngsters who a lot of people rate as being, future world champions or very much in the mix with Verstappen. And that, of course, is Ocon and Carlos Sainz, who made his debut for the Renault team.
Yeah, definitely. Great jobs from Ocon and Sainz, finishing where they started in 6th and 7th. So, splendid job from both of them. And Sainz having to work a little bit harder, I think. He put on a very nice overtake on Perez as well. So, yeah, like you said, future world champions for sure. Definitely in contention for championships in the future. Solid job from Ocon. And Sainz just seems to be gelling, with Renault so well. It looked that way from FP1 and just carried all the way through the race. Like I said, Hulkenberg really wasn't a factor this weekend due to reliability, but Sainz stepped up and did what Palmer has failed to do. He reached, Q3 as well. I think Palmer did that once in 34 races, whatever. So really, really good job from Sainz, and he's fitting in there so well. I mean, Sainz and Hulkenberg, that's a mega lineup, and this completely proved it.
I do agree with you that it's a mega lineup, but I do have a slight concern that maybe Hulkenberg had a few issues in terms of technical issues and reliability, but could this be the end of Hulkenberg's career? Sainz being paired with him.
It could be, yeah. If he's defeated,
he could really show him that maybe Hulkenberg isn't as good as we all thought. I at one stage, maybe like you, thought he was a McLaren or a Ferrari driver in the future, no question. But maybe there's a reason why and that he hasn't been picked before, and maybe Sainz will clearly show that. And I hope not, because I like Hulkenberg, and I'd love this to be a great battle in the midfield, or maybe for wins next year if they got a great car. But yeah, let's keep optimistic. Let's hope that Sainz and Hulkenberg is a very close comparative in terms of.
Well, he's going to push him a lot more than Palmer, isn't he? He's going to push the team forward a lot more. And Renault, they could still get, I think, 6th in the constructors this year. Possibly even could even beat Williams. It's not too much of a stretch. It depends kind of what end of the season they have, if they have Sainz and Hulkenberg both up there. So good possibility of that. Great lineup, as you said. And Bottas didn't get taken by Ferrari when we thought he should be. Bottas then went to Mercedes, didn't quite do as well as we thought. So, maybe these top teams know a little more than us, and maybe Hulkenberg's the same. But we're going to get a proper confirmation of this now. He was beaten by Perez, really. By the end, Perez kind of had him beaten at their time at Force India. So this is Hulkenberg's biggest test.
Definitely. So we're talking about here maybe this being a potential career-ending move for Hulkenberg that he probably had no control over.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Massa, somebody who everybody loves Massa. There's no question about it. But is his days numbered? This is I
think like his team, Massa and Williams are your second favourite team or driver usually.
Yes.
You don't really become a Williams fan. You kind of have a soft spot for Williams. You have a soft spot for Felipe Massa. And that's pretty much how it goes. He seemed to have a lot of determination this weekend. He seemed to be really driving the wheels off that Williams. He clearly, I think, has the motivation for another season in F1. If he's going to get an opportunity, that's a different question. I think it's a head-to-head fight between him and Kubica. They also seem to be looking at, Fiat, Verline, De Resta as well. So we'll have to see how that one goes. But yeah, Massa, I thought drove really well this weekend. In terms of the determination, couldn't quite deliver a massive result. He looked good in practice. He looked like the best of the rest in practice. But as we've so often seen, when it came round to it, he unfortunately couldn't quite deliver, couldn't quite pass Perez. Massa on a 2-stop, Perez on a 1-stop. Couldn't quite catch Perez and pass him. We caught him, but he couldn't pass him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he did great. He was really determined. And I remember somebody was trying to overtake him, who I think it might have been Verstappen, and he was so defensive, even though I think he was peeling into the pits that lap, or it was obvious that at some stage Verstappen was going to pass him. So, we do appreciate that he's fighting for his drive, and it's a shame that somebody like Massa should have to do that. I think he should be a driver that should get to choose when to retire, but maybe that was already, last year. That's the point. He had that opportunity last year, and I know, obviously, if somebody comes up to you and says, do you want to drive an F1 car, and they're going to pay you a lot of money or give you a car for free, then not many people are going to reject that. So I think the spark has been reunited inside of Felipe Massa, and as long as he knows where he is at before Brazil, that's the main thing. Because we want him to have another. That was great last year.
We need him to crash out as well, so we can just in front of the pit lane, so we can walk through it and get a big.
Everybody, that was so good.
Yes, yeah. So I think he'll know after Mexico. Seems to be the word from Williams. That'll be the nice thing to do, especially if you're going to axe him. That'll be the nice thing to do. Kvyat, 10th. Of course, he did bash him a bit earlier in the episode, but I think it was still a good drive because Toro Rosso not historically that good on the circuit. So I think still a decent drive. We can say that. Not
it's
fantastic.
A good drive.
Yeah, not enough though. Too little, too late. I think is the phrase.
I think it's just clear, isn't it, that they're dropping him again. Yeah. They don't want anything to do with him, and it's nasty to say that, but unfortunately, if you're a Kvyat fan, I think his days are definitely over.
I think a drive in the LMP1 or WC or IndyCar, somewhere like that, because he's still young, right? The good thing about being dropped as a Red Bull Junior is that usually you have a youth on your side. Hartley showed that, Buemi showed that, Bourdais showed that, so that's about it. The rest kind of went off a bit, like El Shawari. I guess Verne as well is having a decent go at Formula 3 as well. So there we go. It's not all over, and it's best for Danny Kvyat to move on to bigger and brighter things, and maybe he'll come back in Toro Rosso in 5 years' time, like Hartley. Maybe he'll just pop up randomly.
I really hope you're wrong, Josh. But
anyway,
don't worry. Yeah. So overall, Josh, I think we enjoyed the 2017 United States Grand Prix. I think it was one of the best races in recent times. Very exciting. And
Tom, what?
No, when I mean recent times, I don't mean
this year.
This year.
We'll say this year. I'd say it's up there. Yeah. I think just because of the moments, like some moments can just make a whole Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Like that last lap can just make the whole Grand Prix. So, yeah.
Definitely in very recent times, shall I say.
Right. A race rating then. I think like a solid 7 or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I think the race overall, I think it was, say, 7, 8, whatever.
Yeah, on the
really
2017 barometer, it's an 8. But in what we deserve from F1, it's about a 6.
Yeah, 6.5 maybe.
Yeah. A good, solid F1 race. If you wanted to get someone involved into F1, I'd probably show them this race because you don't want to show them the best ever race, do you? You don't want to take their expectations too high. You want to give them something like this to kind of chew over. That was it. This was a nice, solid F1 race. Plenty of stories up and down the field, and that pretty much brings this section to an end, Tom.
Well, we haven't talked about one thing: driver of the day. This is a very heated debate, and obviously the F1 Twitter thing, they have a poll or whatever, and Verstappen won that. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
I think
it was
Verstappen was very good.
I can't believe that he finished,
third or fourth, whatever.
Yeah, fourth. So 5 seconds. So 11.7 seconds off Hamilton if you take away that penalty, without a safety car. That's crazy.
Very good.
He's him and Hamilton a league of their own this second half of the season.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think the only one last thing that I'd like to say is that I appreciated the breast cancer awareness thing that they did in F1 this Grand Prix. I think it's good to see sports, trying to help other areas in the world, because these are some of the very much some of the luckiest people in the world, and let's try and help others.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was great all weekend. Channel 4 and Sky both did a great job with supporting that as well. So really good, nice for F1 to be embracing nice things, which is always nice under this new regime, which might not have been possible under the old one.
So, Josh, we're almost at the checkered flag of this episode, but before we cross the line, what is it time for?
Well, it's time for the final segment of the show where we answer a question, or maybe in this case questions, submitted by you, the listeners, the F1 radio community. It's time for the questionable queries.
What the hell is happening in the exit on 12? I have no mover if I don't push the K1. Do we really think that the tires will last in the end of the race? Because it doesn't feel like it. Do you really want that I keep going? Because it's just absolute.
So, Josh, what's today's topic of conversation or conversations, and who are asking?
Well, the F1 radio community is going mad with discussion, and also the F1 community in general. We're not going to take all the credit here. But yeah, basically, of course, the major talking point was about Verstappen. We had Matty, Table Matt, saying, obvious one, the Verstappen corner cut didn't need penalising, and we pretty much agreed that it did, but more consistency is needed. So that was the one from him. We mentioned the one from Matt as well about the Toro Rosso roulette. Also got one from Marco about should the FIA be harsher on track limits all round. And again, we pretty much agree with that. Yeah, they should be harsher.
Yep.
That's fine. And then, is Kvyat the worst treated driver ever?
No.
No, there's been worse. He's had his chance, right? But they could have handled it a little better, right? The press release, though, Tom, did not even mention Danny Kvyat for Mexico. They could have said, thanks to Danny Kvyat for his commitment or whatever, or he's bench for this round, but I don't know.
I don't know.
You don't seem to have much sympathy for him. But,
no, he's had his time.
Fair enough. We'll move on then to the main kind of question for this segment, and that's from Marcus Hoare. And he says, driver intros, yay or nay? And of course, he's referring to the kind of brand new or kind of one-off possibly for this round, the kind of driver kind of intros, announcements, all jazzed up before the race. Tom, what do you make of that?
Well, I'm actually a massive boxing fan, so I'm used to seeing this almost every weekend. But obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean that it translates into a great atmosphere in every sport, and it definitely, I don't think, worked that well in Formula 1. I think maybe if they tweak it differently, instead of introducing every single driver and wasting 10 minutes, maybe, introduce the top two, like the bit they did at the end where Hamilton and Vettel were staring at each other and stuff like that. That was like, okay, I can see that working a bit better, but I think that it was a bit too much show, and F1 isn't like that. It's a bit more of a British sport where we don't need all that jazz or whatever. But Mike Buffer, the guy who was doing all the commentary and talking over the MC, as they call them, cool guy. He knows what he's doing, but he didn't know how to pronounce everybody's names, which was unfortunate. But I don't think it would annoy me if it was in every Grand Prix, because I was watching the coverage and everything was already like 15 minutes early, and I was like, well, why is that? And turns out this thing wasted pretty much a lot of time.
Yeah, it was cringy as hell, but I love cringe. So I thought this was... I did like it. It was kind of a bit of a guilty pleasure. And like you said, it was a nice one-off, right? It was America. It was a real flavour of what that should be, and I really like that element. So I think if they could kind of channel this into certain other rounds as well, this would be really, really cool. Not doing the exact same thing, but something that kind of represents that country or that culture would be a really, really cool thing to do. But like you said, I think the way it was kind of done right before the race, or kind of half an hour before the race, doesn't make much sense, because the drivers are just so focused on, their, kind of doing, their kind of race out and that. They don't want to have all this kind of, flashbang thing going on. The way they did it with F1 Live earlier in the season, of course, that was away from a Grand Prix weekend, and that worked brilliantly because the drivers were relaxed, they were chilled out, and they could give the fans a real good show. I think you're making a bit too much entertainment out of the pre-race, really, by doing this. But at the same time, look, they were trying something different, and I'm not going to criticise them for doing that. I think ultimately we think that it could be better, but at the same time, we applaud them for having a go, and we hope that they do something like this in the future. Different variations of this would be really, really cool. Not next weekend in Mexico, leave it for now, but maybe something in Abu Dhabi or something would be quite nice to see. Having said that, though, maybe don't take on all of Abu Dhabi's customs. Of course, they're still a bit backwards. Anyway, Tom, that's pretty much it, I think, for this for answering that question, unless you have anything else more to add.
No, all I wanted to say was that I completely agree with you. I think it's great to see Liberty are really taking the bull by the horns, and they're trying new things. Whatever you may, like you said, think about it, it's good to see that they're trying this, and obviously the streaming, etc. It really does look like F1 is going on a positive curve, if you get me.
Problem is, though, that it was like taking iPads and putting them in old people's home. Like, people were so culture shocked by, what is this? This is not F1. This is not kind of, boring, not boring, but kind of not kind of toned down, not too much, kind of showiness. And then this was just completely full on. So I think, like you said, it was a bit kind of the other end of the spectrum, which shocked a lot of people on Twitter, and the kind of Channel 4 guys were just kind of stood around, and I think mesmerised. Eddie Jordan reaction was pretty priceless as well. So yeah, good job from the TV crews as well all weekend. Like I said, supporting breast cancer as well, and all stuff. I really enjoyed the whole weekend as a whole. I think it's nice having the race on later as well for people in the UK and Europe. Nice to have it on an evening, something to kind of look forward to during the day.
Yeah, it's great to have that on instead of some trash like X Factor or whatever.
That's true. Robot Wars, though, was on the other side.
Oh, I didn't realise they brought it back. So.
Third series, yeah. Anyway.
Third season. Wow.
This is the third series of the reboot, Tom. Where have you been? I know you're not up to date with technology and that, but
no, I'm not. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and petrol heads all around the world, we've reached the end of this race. I thank Josh for co-hosting the show with me today, and I thank you, the listeners. It's people like you and I that keep this racing spirit alive in the world of Formula One. So we cannot thank you enough for supporting our show. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, share, and whatever else you can do with an episode on of this podcast on the variety of platforms that host F1 Radio, including iTunes, YouTube, and TuneIn, if, of course, you like what you heard. Until next time, it's been a pleasure to serve.